This is Harry Judd for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Rafael. First of all, Dan, how are we?
We're doing just fine. I'm happy to be with you guys. You know, I always have love for Boxing Social. It's all good.
Top man. Well, look, let me just crack straight on. It looks like the AJ Fury fight is unlikely. You said in your newsletter, I got it this morning, it's probably late afternoon for you, that you sent it out, that this was always a pipe dream, Fury AJ, to be done in a short space of time, Dan. So you were always pessimistic.
Listen, when you've been around boxing, not to make myself sound like an old geezer, but when you've been doing it for over 20 years, you've seen a lot of stuff, and major fights, which we all want to see take place, are the lifeblood of the sport for the fans and for we as media, and to get people excited. They're very important. But I also know that in this business and this sport, making those big mega fights takes time, and unfortunately, it gets drawn out a lot of times. So would it be great if Tyson Fury could make an Instagram video and say, here's my offer, I'm going to, lay it out there, AJ, take it or leave it, and here's what the terms are. And then they suddenly come back, like, a day or two later and says, we're in. I wish every big fight was that easy, but I know from experience, and also who you're dealing with. You're not dealing with, people that are not experienced, people like Eddie Hearn at Matchroom with the Joshua team, and Frank Warren with Tyson Fury. These are highly experienced boxing people who know this business inside and out. And there's lots of things that go into making a deal that don't take 5 minutes. That it shouldn't take months and months and months, but could it take 2 or 3 weeks, a month? Yeah, absolutely. So again, my hope was that, they caught lightning in a bottle and everybody was on the same page and it would get done. And I was hopeful for it. And it's a fight I would love to see. But the realistic part of me knows that it was still highly unlikely. And, maybe it will still happen, but based on the comments from Fury, which, he changes his mind about as often as, people change their socks, I guess. It doesn't appear as though it's going to happen, at least not December 3rd, which is a shame. But I'm not disappointed because my hopes were never high. So I never had any expectation of it in the first place. Hopeful, but did not expect it. So as you said, I wrote in my newsletter, Fight Freaks Unite, which I hope people will subscribe to, that it was, a pipe dream, and it was fun to talk about for a few days. And, I just learned big fights don't get made with one party badgering the other party on social media.
Is that counterproductive, the social media taunts and jibes online? Is it counterproductive?
I don't know if I'd say it's counterproductive, because there definitely have been some fights that have been, I won't say they were made wholly by social media, but certainly the banter and the back and forth didn't hurt. As an example, and I say this because it's a fight that's on my mind because it's coming up, and I had just interviewed one of the principals, the fight between George Kambosos and Devin Haney. When Lomachenko withdrew from the fight earlier in the year because he was going to remain in Ukraine as part of the defense of the country, suddenly Devin Haney piped up and said, and to Kambosos on social media, I'll take that fight, same terms as Lomachenko. And you know what? They gave him the same terms as Lomachenko when he took the fight. And so in that one particular instance, I mean, it's not common, but that actually helped facilitate the fight. But unfortunately, and of course, now they're headed for a rematch, which why it was on my mind that I had just recently had an interview with Devin Haney. But more often than not, it is, I think, sometimes counterproductive. Maybe I'm just too old school, but to me, big fights get made. It's one thing to bring them up in public and have the principals go back and forth a little bit. That's obviously good for, getting people excited and kind of building up the event. But when it really comes to the actual business part of the equation of making the actual deal and getting contracts done and the language proper and everything signed, sealed, and delivered, it's best to do it behind closed doors, not in the public, and not to do it on social media, and not to do it in as a media person. Of course, you'd like to be privy to all the details, but I understand if they actually want to get deals done, it has to be done without the media and the fans knowing all the details, and then just get it squared away and make your announcements, do your press conferences, and let the fire build to the fight. So in the case of Fury and Joshua, look, they were supposed to fight last year, and it didn't happen not because of either of their fault, but Fury lost that arbitration case that basically forced the third fight with Deontay Wilder.
Mm.
And so I sort of figured like maybe it had a chance to come back because they had already made a deal before. Granted, the terms are much different now because of it would be in the UK, not in the Middle East. Obviously, it would be a lot less money on the table because it wasn't like Saudis were buying the event to bring to Saudi Arabia. Obviously, Anthony Joshua has suffered back-to-back losses. It would not be for the undisputed title like it would have been at the time. So there's a lot of things that changed.
Mm.
But in essence, it's still a fight between these two, big boxing stars. So I was hopeful, but the social media, I don't think helped this at all because Fury just can't help himself. I guess sometimes, it's one thing for him to go on social media and have his say, and that's fine and good. But he sometimes takes a little bit too far, and just the constant videos and all that just sort of make people, sort of scratch their head and get bored with the whole thing.
Will this go down? We've seen it. You again know far more than anyone. We've seen this happen time and time again. Will this be one of those fights that never happened?
I'd never say
You
never.
never say never, but again, it's looking again. It's the second time we've had this.
That's true. I don't know why it wouldn't happen. And I mean, maybe it doesn't happen in December, but I think that Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, look, they've both made the kind of money where they don't have to box anymore. They can retire and live comfortably for the rest of their lives and take care of generations of Furies and Joshuas to come. But they're fighting men. They've got the fighting spirit. They're still very good at it. Joshua may have lost a couple of fights, but it's not like he's suddenly can't fight anymore and is not going to be a worthy challenger or competitor for any of the heavyweights out there. Maybe Usyk's got his number to a certain degree. But the point is, I do think that there's a good chance that it can still happen because people still want to see it. And when people want to see a fight, that means there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of excitement to be brought. So I do think that eventually you'll see Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua fight the same way I hope we'll see someday Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua fight, or Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk fight. I made a comment recently that to me, and I've studied, boxing history for most of my life. This, to me, the current heavyweight era that we are in is probably the third best heavyweight era in boxing history. Obviously you got the 1970s with the greats of Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier and George Foreman leading the way, but other excellent contenders also. And then, of course, the 90s era, which is, when I was a young man, really following it closely with, Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield and Tyson and Michael Moore and Tommy Morrison and Razor Ruddock and on, Ray Mercer, and just a tremendous amount of good fights that were made between these guys that were all fighting each other. And now this is probably that next batch. And I say that now it's not over yet. So there's still fights to be made between a lot of these guys. Hopefully when the era is concluded, we'll have seen them. But you're talking about obviously Fury, Wilder, Joshua, Usyk, Andy Ruiz, Luis Ortiz, upcoming guys like Filip Hrgović who are still in this era. You've got the fight, Robert Helenius. He's fighting Deontay Wilder coming up. He's been a good contender for a while. Point is, there's a lot of quality fights that are being made in this weight class between guys who have, been in some good battles. And I feel like it's a deep heavyweight division compared to what usually heavyweight divisions are. Most people don't realize that for most of boxing history, other than the guy at the top or a couple, 2-3 guys at the top, the division is usually terrible. But we are blessed right now to have a very quality, deep weight class with several fighters that are interesting. By the way, I didn't even mention like Dillian White and, even like, the old Warhorse Chisora, guys like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty biased. We're very blessed, especially in the UK, to have some great heavyweights. I mean, in terms of this country, it's been absolutely astounding. In terms of, you look at the heavyweights that we've got in all different, the top fives and you name it, we've got them all there. Going back to the AJ,
I think when I was talking about the 90s, I didn't even mention Riddick Bowe, who was involved in some great fights also. I mean, when you're forgetting guys like that, it was a pretty damn deep weight class.
Going back to the AJ Fury thing, we haven't seen the contract, obviously, but how much of an issue is Joshua's exclusive deal with DAZN? How much do you reckon that's one of the reasons why this maybe collapsed?
Well, I would suggest that it's not just his contract with DAZN. The same could be said for Fury's contract with BT/ESPN. In other words, it's not a matter of one guy's with one or one guy's the other. It's that they're both with different outlets. So it's not like either one is to blame for it. Tyson Fury has his deal with his broadcasters, BT in the UK and ESPN in the United States. Anthony Joshua now exclusive to DAZN in both the United States and the UK. And as I made the point in the column that you referenced earlier, it's one thing for Tyson Fury and Frank Warren to say 60-40, and for Joshua and Eddie Hearn to say, fine, we'll take the 40%. That's terrific. And because, listen, at the end of the day, when you make these big boxing deals, what's the most significant thing that they argue about? Usually it's the split. What's the split? So for Fury to right out of the gate offer 60-40, and Joshua and Hearn realized that was obviously a very honest offer, and they took it, that's good. But then, like you said, the broadcaster becomes an issue. You have to allow these companies an opportunity to figure out how to do it, because I would suggest that neither company should allow their man to cross the street. They've both invested heavily in their fighter. And, and I go back to the days when you had the massive wars between HBO and Showtime years, over the years. They were able to work together on 2 fights in terms of pay-per-view, 3 fights in total. But they did Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather together. They did Mike Tyson and Lennox Lewis together. And then, not as a pay-per-view, they also worked together on Klitschko versus Anthony Joshua for the American broadcast. So it can be done. And then more recently, of course, ESPN, which had Tyson Fury, and Fox Network here in America, which had Deontay Wilder, they were able to work together on both the second and third fight between those 2 fighters. So there's no reason why DAZN and BT/ESPN can't come to some kind of arrangement. But that's not the kind of thing that, you snap your fingers and get done in a few days, while Tyson Fury is busy making videos saying, sign the contract, sign the contract, sign the contract. The contract's not something that just says 60-40 split, sign Anthony Joshua. It doesn't work like that. So, Tyson, I get his anxiousness to get it squared away, but I feel like he was a little deceptive because he didn't mention that it's not just about the split. Yes, Anthony Joshua accepted the split. Yes, he said okay to the date, December 3rd. Yes, he said okay to the location in Principality Stadium in Cardiff. But the TV, which is going to generate, the vast majority of the revenue for the event, that's obviously something that has to be squared away in it. These are big companies that don't move, in one day. They move at like glacier-like speed. They've got lawyers, and they have to come to before you can even put it to a contract and put the language down and agree to it. You have to come up, what's the framework? You got to have a conversation and discuss how that's going to work. And it's everything from the big stuff to like, what's the split? How's it delivered? What's the exclusivity? What's this? What's that? All the way down to like, who are the talent that's going to do the broadcast? What's the graphics package going to be? Because they both have identifiable to their viewers of what they look like. What's it going to sound like? There's just a whole slew of things that have to get handled. And again, it shouldn't take months and months, but it sure as heck doesn't happen in 10 days.
It's now looking that we will have the Manuel Charr fight. You did mention this again in your newsletter. Just go through your thoughts on that one. I see you shaking your head there, Dan.
I mean, it's just a joke, if you ask me, because listen, to me, it's always about in any kind of entertainment business, especially, under promise and over deliver. This is the exact opposite. You promise Anthony Joshua when you deliver Manuel Charr. It is like converse to what it should be. If you had told people I'm going to fight Manuel Charr, and then you suddenly came back and said, oh, hold up, I've decided we're going to make this Anthony Joshua fight, that's a different story. So I'm not like anti-Manuel Charr. And Tyson Fury certainly, having the 3 fights with Deontay Wilder and coming off the Dylan White fight, if he wanted to just take an optional fight, knowing that the Usyk fight was not available to him at the moment because of Usyk's decision to sit back for a little bit and rest up some injuries. And he decided he just wanted to take a stay busy, quote unquote, softer kind of fight. Like, I don't think anybody would really get on Tyson Fury's case about that. He's a great fighter. I mean, my irritation with his videos aside is nothing to do with my thoughts about him as a boxer. He's a great fighter, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer, and he's the champ of the world. He's earned his opportunities to do the sorts of fights he wants to do. So if he wanted to do a Manuel Charr fight, I don't love it, but I can't nitpick it and knock him for it. But it's kind of hard to wrap your head around going from Anthony Joshua, which by all accounts, even with Joshua coming off back-to-back losses, is still a mega fight. In no universe that exists is Manuel Charr a mega fight. So Fury is certainly going to take a lot less money to fight that fight if it actually comes to pass. And, I couldn't tell you I'm not sure if people in Manuel Charr's family think he can win that fight. I mean, again, he's a good heavyweight, but if Tyson Fury is an A plus heavyweight, Manuel Charr is like like a B minus C plus kind of heavyweight. Good fighter, honest fighter, not knocking the guy. He's been in the ring with a lot of good fighters. Lost to most of them, frankly, as far as the best guys. Will forever be, unless he somehow pulled off the upset against Tyson Fury, will probably forever be known as the guy that was the last opponent for Vitaly Klitschko before he retired. He got stopped in that fight on a terrible cut. So I don't think there'll be a lot of interest in a Tyson Fury Manuel Charr fight. I can't imagine it doing robust business on pay-per-view in the UK. Some people will buy it, obviously. In the United States, I mean, even Tyson Fury against Dillian White was kind of DOA here in America. Against Manuel Charr, it would be like a non-existent event, if you ask me. Listen, good luck to Tyson Fury, good luck to Manuel Charr, but let's have some real fights.
In terms of pay-per-view, we in Manchester were blessed with the Joseph Parker and Joe Joyce fight. We knew it was going to be an old-fashioned heavyweight fight, but I think many of us in that arena on Saturday night were just absolutely astounded in how good that fight was in terms of tempo, in terms of the amount of punches which Joe Joyce just took and just carried on coming forward. But again, just get your thoughts on that one, Dan.
I expected it to be a good fight. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was, like you mentioned yourself. Listen, it was terrific because those two guys were going after it. They knew there's a lot on the line. Neither guy wants to lose. Joyce is undefeated, wanted to keep that perfect record. Parker, has been on a nice winning streak since his back-to-back losses against White and Anthony Joshua. He has aspirations to be a champion again. And it was just a great matchup. I thought it would be good going in. It turned out to be better than I expected. But Joe Joyce, as I've been saying for a while, I'm not sort of like saying this just because it's after the fact and I saw what I saw in their fight. But I've thought for quite a while now that Joe Joyce is sort of like the boogeyman of the division, where he's going to give every single guy out there a problem, whether it's Usyk, Wilder, Joshua, Fury, pick a heavyweight. He's going to be competitive and perhaps can win those fights. And he can do that because, as I've made the comments before, he's not particularly fast with his hands or his feet. He's very robotic and slow. And those are negatives against him. But he has the two greatest attributes you can have if you're going to be a heavyweight contender or a heavyweight champion. And that is a tremendous ability to take a shot, got a great chin, one of the best chins I've seen in the heavyweight division in a long time, and has great power. And he can knock a guy out, whether it's a matter of putting punches together or just one shot. He just carries a heavy punch. And if you can combine those two together, you're going to go a long way in boxing. Not to mention, and this is something that he can't control, but he's so big that he's also a problem just based on the sheer size of him as a person. So he is going to be in any fight that he's in. He may not win every fight. I mean, he hasn't fought all the best guys yet, but so far so good. I mean, he's been fighting legitimate opposition since he basically turned pro because of his age, being that he was, an older fighter when he came out of the Olympics with the silver medal, which, by the way, a lot of people thought he should have had the gold, that he had gotten, a bad decision in that final against Tony Yoka back in the Olympic Games. So Joe Joyce is maybe 37 years old, but he's, I think, a fresh 37. Heavyweights certainly don't age usually as quickly as fighters in the smaller weight division. So I think he's got several good years left in him. It would probably behoove him to maybe shore up the defense a little bit because he can't keep taking those kind of clean shots like he did against Joe Parker. But one thing that struck me in that fight, as I'm watching it, I'm seeing, he's starting to, by the time they got to the second half, it was sort of really competitive for like the first 5.5, 6 rounds. And then after that, it was all Joe Joyce. But what struck me was, I think it was maybe like round 5, round 6, round 7, something like that. Parker landed like literally the best right hand he could land, right on the button. And Joe Joyce didn't flinch and just kept walking forward. And so if you're Parker, what are you thinking? You're like, I'm getting my ass kicked. I'm taking huge punches. I finally land my biggest shot, and the guy just walks right through it. That has to be, as discouraging it is to get pounded by the other shots from the other man. It has to be equally or more discouraging to land your best shot and nothing happened. And you're like, what the heck can I do? And that was the situation I think that Parker found himself in. And eventually Joe Joyce was like that proverbial train going down the mountain without any brakes, and he ran him over.
It was for the WBO interim title, something that which you've been quite vocal against. The counter argument for that was that it's to enable the unification fights between Usyk and Fury. But what was your opinion on that? Yeah, the interim WBO title. What was your opinion for the viewers?
My thought was it was not necessary. If you want to become the official eliminator, the guy's still the mandatory, wonderful, and the winner comes out and he's guaranteed a title shot. I guess for the interim, to take the alternate point of view, I guess it adds a little bit of hype to the event. Now it's for a title, even though I think most savvy boxing fans know that it's not a real title. The other thing that it does do is that in the event that there were to be a purse bid for the interim champion, meaning the winner of that fight, which turned out to be Joyce, if there was a purse bid for a mandatory against the holder of the WBO title, whether it was Usyk or if it was, let's say it was Fury, if they had fought and Fury won, what it does, it would give the guy with the interim title a little bit of a more percentage of the money if it went to a purse bid. So from a financial point of view, it is of assistance to the winner of the fight. But to me, look, Alexander Usyk had just fought. He was the WBO champion. He had two of the other titles. He beat Joshua. So if he goes on an 8-month sabbatical, that is not in any way abnormal in boxing. He's not injured to the extent that he can't fight. He's just taking some time off, which is his point. That's his purview to do that. So it just seemed unnecessary to me. And I feel like boxing has leaned too heavily on all these extraneous titles. What's wrong with being the number one contender? That's still a pretty good position, and for the WBO to say that it was to allow the unification, that's bullshit, because they can allow the unification anyway on a vote of their board. So, the rules are made up as they go along sometimes. Look, I respect the WBO. I know a lot of the guys that work there. I've been friendly with Paco Varkarsel for, like 20 years. I have a personal a relationship with him. He's a good guy. He's a good boxing guy. We just disagree on this, and I'm not like, look, there's a lot of other things I get more ticked off about than this. I just felt like it was unnecessary. They did it. I'm not gonna sit here and quarrel with it forever and ever. I just felt like it was unnecessary. The fight stood for itself. It was a great fight, and it would have been a great fight whether they had an interim belt or a number one contender spot up for grabs. Either way, in the end, it seems to me, based on the way the schedule looks like it's going to unfold, that probably Joe Joyce won't get the opportunity to fight Usyk, and eventually that belt will become vacated, and he will just be elevated to the championship level anyway. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with that.
Why'd you say that? Why, again, for people that don't know, why wouldn't Joe Joyce get? Because like you said, Usyk's not available until 2023. But for the people that don't know, why would that be an issue?
Well, it just seems like Usyk in his comments over the last recent weeks that he just is not interested in fighting the mandatory. I don't think it's because he's afraid to fight Joe Joyce or anybody. It's just that he's got other fights on his mind. If he does fight Fury, and he wins, I don't see him fighting Joyce. He says he's got 3 fights left. He outlined what he wanted to do. Now, of course, that can change in a moment's notice. If Fury does fight Usyk and becomes undisputed, he's going to have a lot of mandatories that are going to stack up. Him and Joyce would be a big fight in the UK. Obviously, it would be a tremendous battle. But I don't know if Fury would necessarily go and want to do that either. And it just feels like at some point that belt will become vacant, and he'd be elevated. I mean, I hope that's not the case. I'd love to see Joyce fight Usyk or fight Fury, but that's just sort of me reading the tea leaves. I don't have any like inside knowledge of it. It's sort of looking at it from afar. You've seen these types of things happen before where belts become vacated. It's less common, I guess, in the heavyweight division just because of how much juice those belts mean, to keep them tied up if you have them. But I guess we'll have to see what happens. But I guess the point is I'm a little skeptical that we're ever going to see Usyk and Joyce is all.
Yeah, I think you're right to be skeptical. Tyson Fury, we mentioned Tyson Fury in social media. He's on it, seems 24/7. I think it was this afternoon UK time that he put out a clip saying that Joe Joyce is his number 2. I'm interested in getting your top 6 heavyweights at this current moment, Dan.
Well, Tyson Fury is number 1. I would say Alexander Usyk has proven himself at number 2, despite a limited run in the division, because he had come up from cruiserweight. He got the 2 big wins against Joshua. So I think the guys with the belts, the guys with the titles, the guys with that recognition, the guys who are undefeated, it's Tyson Fury number 1. and Usyk number 2. And then after that, you can have a bit of a debate. I still think Anthony Joshua ranks very highly. I would probably put him still number 3. I might have Joyce as high as 4. Deontay Wilder, probably 5 or 4. And then number 6, who's next? I guess, even though Dillian White is coming off of that loss, I still might have him in that spot. He's been a good contender for a long time. And just because he lost to Tyson Fury, he lost to the best guy, doesn't mean he should be erased from the top 10. But those are the 6 guys. I guess you can certainly, I would be open to discussion on the order beyond number 1 and 2. If you wanted to rejigger that order, but basically, you got Fury and Usyk stand apart, and then it's, in whatever order you want. It's AJ, Wilder, Joyce, and White. And am I missing? I mean, who am I missing? I mean, I think, some people might look at Andy Ruiz. He's coming off a nice win against King Kong Ortiz, who was also a good contender in his own right. But Ruiz has been, for my taste, a little bit too inactive to get that high of a position. And he really does still, other than the Ortiz, which was a good win, but nothing spectacular. He's basically lives on the upset of Joshua, which is, a fight that he didn't show up for in the rematch and lost going away. So he's still a good heavyweight contender. But I think those are the main guys. Unless, am I missing somebody that I'm off? Because you just asked me straight off the top of my head. It's not like I studied for this beforehand. But those are the guys that come to my mind.
Yeah. Moving on as well to another weekend's action, Shakur Stevenson up to lightweight, a comfortable performance. He has said previously he's found it hard to make 130, now moving up to 135. What did you make of his performance?
Other than the fact that he missed the weight and got stripped of the titles, which is never a good situation.
No.
Putting that aside for a moment, and it's not, look, he's not the first guy to miss weight and lose a title, and he's certainly not going to be the last. But putting that aside for a moment, I'll just to back up on that, I appreciate the fact that he was like, look, I'm sorry, I just couldn't do it. Like, he didn't make excuses about it. He was just like, I messed up. It happened. I got to a point, and I've seen this happen before. Guys get to a certain point, and they just can't shed the last little bit. People say, well, it was only a pound and a half. Well, yeah, maybe only a pound and a half or a pound 0.6. But he'd already lost before that. Even at the day of the weigh-in, they had extended the time for when the weigh-in would start to give Shakur a little extra time to try to shake that weight. And again, according to his team, he'd already been trying for 4 hours. So there was really nothing left to give. The 2 hours that he had to lose the extra weight after the weigh-in when he was over wasn't going to help. So, but aside from that issue, in terms of his actual performance in the ring against Conceição, he was spectacular. Conceição is a 3-time Olympian. He's an Olympic gold medal winner. His only professional loss was a very controversial decision to Oscar Valdez in a title challenge. And then after that fight, Shakur wiped out Oscar Valdez early this year to take that belt. So he was fighting the guy that some people thought was like the quote-unquote uncrowned champion. And he beat him just as bad as he beat Oscar Valdez. He dropped him the same way he dropped Valdez. And he basically won, at worst, like 8 rounds or 9 rounds. Maybe you could have had it even close to 11 or even a shutout potentially. Point is, it was a dominating victory for Shakur Stevens, who I believe, and I've said this for a while, this kid is a special talent. I mean, if he stays focused and trains hard and doesn't let outside the ring nonsense, derail his career, and stays on the straight and narrow, he's got a chance to be. People say, what's his ceiling? His ceiling is to be the number 1 fighter pound for pound in boxing, to win titles. He's already done it in 2 divisions. I can see him based on his body, his size and his build. Definitely can be a champion in 4 weight classes, because he's going to win a title probably at some time at 35. Absolutely can be a champion at 140. Then it becomes a little bit more difficult as you go from 40 to 47, but it's not impossible. But I would say minimum of 4 weight classes and a Hall of Famer down the road. That's the kind of talent he has. Silver medal in the Olympics, phenomenal amateur career, turned pro early, finally is now a grown man. You can see him developing his power. He's not ever going to be a knockout artist, but, in his last 2 fights against, Conceição was a legit top contender, and Oscar Valdez, who was an undefeated champion when he fought him, he scored knockdowns against both of those guys. So, to me, what's the ceiling? Hall of Fame, pound for pound, multiple division champion. I mean, that's the potential. I'm not like trying to lay it on thick. That's just the reality in my mind.
There's lots I want to talk to you about. I've got to chat about September 17th. I don't know if anyone got your instant reaction to it. Well, it's not instant anymore, but you said it was going to be a long distance fight. A lot of people had it, Canelo getting rid of Golovkin early on, which again was never the case. But Golovkin was very negative in that fight. But how did you see it, Dan?
Well, it was disappointing, number one. I mean, especially after having covered their first two fights, which were just, classic kind of battles, controversial decisions notwithstanding. Although those decisions, because of the controversy, sort of add to the lore of the rivalry, if you will. I did hear from many people leading up to that fight, both before I got to Las Vegas and then once I was in Las Vegas, that, I don't know, a lot of people for some reason felt like Canelo was going to just run over Golovkin and stop him. I didn't ever think that for 2 seconds. I said that many times. I'm like, Canelo is probably going to win the fight, absolutely. But I see no evidence why anybody would pick a knockout. Certainly, it's possible a guy lands a great shot or lands, especially like a body punch. Either way, they both are capable of stopping the other guy in that fashion. So I wasn't at all surprised that it went the distance. The only positive I took out of it was at least when the scores were read, the right guy won, and there was no controversy over the decision. Although the scorecards that the judges
make of those? 160,
I thought they were shitty.
115, 113, 115, 113.
Terrible. Look, Dave Moretti, who's a Hall of Fame level judge, been a great judge for a long time. He had that fight 116 to 112. To me, that was the absolute outer bound of like even something that was comprehensible. I didn't agree with that. I thought it was much wider than that. I can live with 116, 112. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I can't find really anybody that does, but whatever. 8-4, if you want to really, really bend over backwards to give Triple G every single possible benefit of the doubt, maybe you can get to 8-4. The other judges, Sutherland and Steve Weisfeld, also good judges. I'm not knocking them. I've known Weisfeld for a long, long time. Good guy, great judge. I've said 1,000 times to me he's the best judge in boxing, bar none right now. I don't agree with that scorecard. I thought it was a bad scorecard. At least he had the right guy, Sutherland also. 7-5 to me is not possible. That means you're one round away from a draw. I mean, get the F out of here, a draw. I mean, 7-5 is just not credible. My opinion. I had the fight 11 rounds to 1. I could certainly, to me, the credible scoring, every fight has like a range that's would be considered like acceptable to the masses. To me, the range on a Triple G Canelo 3 would have been anywhere from 11-1 to 9-3. You can find rounds where you might want to argue Golovkin. He certainly had better rounds in the second half of the fight than he did in the first half of the fight. So maybe if you give like the first round where really not a whole lot happened, maybe you give that to Golovkin and you're going to find a couple more rounds, 9 and 10 to give him. That seems not illogical. But 7-5 just is not good. 8-4, the 8-4 kind of gets covered up because the 7-5s are so bad. You know what I mean? So it's not going to be a fight that people will remember for a long time. What they'll remember is that Canelo Alvarez and Triple G were both great championship fighters, Hall of Fame level fighters. They had a great rivalry, and they had 2 great fights, and the third one was just whatever. That's sort of how it goes.
I'm conscious we haven't got much time left. I do want to really chat about next weekend. The rivalry continues, the generations continue between Eubank and Ben. As someone obviously from the US, I don't know whether the first fights between the dads was even televised over there. Boxing and television was completely different back then. Did you get to see?
The first fight between Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank, Senior, to my recollection, was not televised in America. So I saw that fight, but it wasn't until after I had seen the second fight. Actually, I knew the result of what had occurred, but hadn't actually seen it. The second fight between them was shown on Showtime in the United States, and Eubank and Ben in particular had a handful of fights that were on Showtime. So their second fight, especially coming off their first fight, did get some hype here in the States, and boxing fans certainly knew about it. The first fight was more under the radar, at least in America. As far as the fight that comes up between their sons, I'm excited for it. I know it's a catchweight fight. It's not for a championship. It's maybe a little bit sooner, I think, than maybe people would have anticipated if they were going to fight, because Conor is still so young in his career. But you know what? It's a big event, and I thought I forget if it was Connor or Eubank that was saying this at their during their press conferences, that this was a fight they're born into, basically. Like, it was inevitable that they were going to have to fight each other at some point, and they figured out a way to overcome the weight disparity. I give credit to Connor for being willing to put on some weight, particularly at this young stage of his career, to take this kind of gamble. And for Eubank also, you know, who's in a position where he's ranked in all the organizations, he's probably in line for some kind of title fight where he doesn't necessarily need to mess around with the young guy. I think it would be more embarrassing, frankly, if he loses than if Ben loses, because Eubank is the more experienced, more veteran fighter, you know, in the heavier weight, and Connor's still considered sort of like the prospect / emerging contender. You know, it would be a little bit more embarrassing for Eubank to lose the fight, it seems to me. And at the end of the day, whoever loses, I mean, this is not, I don't think this is how people should feel, but the boxer, whoever loses the fight, is probably going to feel, and it's unfortunate, it shouldn't be this way, but they're going to somehow feel like maybe they disgraced the family name, which is not fair, you know, as long as they both go in there and give their best effort. So there's a lot on the line as far as like the family name, how they're going to feel about themselves as fighters. Certainly fans are going to have their say about it, you know, depending on who wins, you know, it sort of, you know, will be how maybe the names are remembered. I just hope, listen, I hope that there's no funny business when it comes to making the weight. It seems like, you know, Eubank is on schedule if you watch his social media videos of him having his snacks and all that. And you hope that these guys sell out and put on a hell of a fight. I expect it to be a really interesting fight. I'm for a non-championship caliber fight, you know, I'm pretty pumped up for it.
I think we all are, and I think especially from the UK, we know the history more. That these two sort of dabble into the casual market. They're both sort of celebrities in some regard, as well as the fathers are, as well as obviously athletes. But Dan, I could talk to you all day, but thank you very, very much for your time, and hopefully we will catch up soon. But thank you very much for talking to Boxing Social, Dan.